Have reports of the Quad's demise, have they been over-exaggerated? The group brings together the U.S., India, Japan, and Australia, four democracies that aim to coordinate their response to strategic concerns in the Indo-Pacific region. Also, to provide a counterweight to, you guessed it, China. Last year, the Quad leaders summit that was supposed to happen in India, it never happened. But now there are signs that the U.S. could be breathing new life into a forum the Chinese view with suspicion. Foreign ministers from the four countries met today in Delhi and announced new initiatives to work together in the areas of maritime security, critical minerals, and energy.
We are beginning to show real achievements and real accomplishments. We are deeply committed to this partnership. It is a linchpin and a cornerstone of our global strategy as a nation in the United States.
The Indo-Pacific will become even more important to the world. The responsibilities of the Quad will grow commensurately, and we must prepare for that.
Well, China once dismissed the Quad, calling it sea foam that would soon disappear. But the tide turned, with Beijing becoming more hostile as the group gained momentum. China now portrays the Quad as an anti-China initiative.
China has repeatedly made clear its position on the Quad. Cooperation between countries should contribute to regional peace, stability and prosperity, and should not target any third party. We do not support the formation of exclusive cliques or bloc confrontation. No cooperation should undermine mutual trust among countries in the region.
And for more on the Quad, I'm joined now by Chietigj Bajpaee. He's a senior research fellow for South Asia in the Asia-Pacific program at Chatham House. It's good to have you with us this evening. You know, less than 2 weeks ago, U.S. President Trump visited China. He spoke of the two powers working together as a G2. Now we're seeing the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, referring to the Quad as a linchpin of U.S. global strategy. And I'm sure the Chinese are not going to like hearing that. So do we know what is the U.S. policy here?
Well, I think the U.S. policy towards the Quad is in a bit of a state of flux. I mean, there were high hopes for the Quad going into the second Trump administration. I mean, one of Secretary of State Marco Rubio's first official engagements last year was to meet his Quad counterparts. A leader-level summit was supposed to take place last year in India, but it never happened amid the downturn in India-U.S. relations. But I also think it reflects to some degree President Trump's preference for bilateral over multi or minilateral initiatives. And we've seen this with the summit meetings that he's held with President Xi Jinping earlier this month and President Putin in Alaska last year. I mean, frankly, I think Trump sees more value in some of these bilateral meetings over these minilateral or multilateral groupings with so-called like-minded countries. And I think that the Quad foreign ministers meeting, which is just taking place, is an effort to try and revive the Quad's momentum, reaffirm the U.S. commitment to the initiative, which ironically was actually first revived under the first Trump administration back in 2017.
Can we say that the Quad, in its essence now, is all about containing China, or is that too simplistic?
Yeah, I mean, this idea of the Quad being some sort of anti-China initiative is, of course, not new. I mean, the Quad has, on occasion, been referred to as some sort of Asian NATO, which I think is, frankly, an inaccurate description, because three of its members, Australia, Japan, and the United States, are formal alliance partners, and one, India, is not. And given India's longstanding commitment to strategic autonomy, it remains apprehensive of joining any forum or grouping that resembles some sort of formal military alliance. I mean, the Quad does profess this commitment to upholding the rules-based international order, this idea of a free and open Indo-Pacific, supporting trusted and resilient infrastructure. And to that extent, it can be seen potentially as a challenge to China's might is right approach and its sometimes opaque economic policies. But if you even look at the Quad member states, the four members, they don't necessarily see eye to eye on China themselves. I mean, Tokyo maintains a difficult relationship with Beijing. New Delhi, Canberra, and Washington are all seeking some sort of reset in relations with Beijing. So I don't think, as I said, that the member states themselves see eye to eye on China.
What about the way China sees the Quad? I mean, it has gone through a transition here, starting by dismissing the Quad to now becoming openly hostile towards the forum. What triggered this change of attitude?
Well, I mean, if you go back to the roots of the Quad, or what is formerly known as the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, which was established back in 2007, I mean, it's a grouping of Asia's 4 major maritime democracies: Australia, India, Japan, and the United States. So there's already a value-based component that these are democratic countries. It was initially focused on humanitarian disaster relief operations in the aftermath of the Indian Ocean tsunami back in 2004. But what began as an initiative focused on maritime security has evolved over time with a more broad-based mandate covering everything from climate to pandemic response, strengthening supply chain resilience, and critical and emerging technologies. I think the Chinese have been alarmed by some of the rhetoric, this idea of a free and open Indo-Pacific, this idea of ensuring this being a grouping of Asia's major maritime democracies, the fact that there is an underlying value-based component to it, I think, and talk of this being some sort of Asian NATO, I think that has alarmed the Chinese. But I think at this point, I mean, frankly, these concerns are somewhat exaggerated. There have been initiatives that have been launched, particularly with a focus on maritime security during the most recent foreign ministers meeting, which is probably going to be of greatest concern to Beijing.
If the initiatives announced by the foreign ministers in Delhi, if those initiatives are successful, will they show the Quad is a relevant force within the Indo-Pacific region, or do you think it's going to take more than that?
Well, I think there is an attempt to, particularly under the Trump administration's more transactional foreign policy, initiatives that are based on so-called shared values have less value to the United States. So to revive the Quad's relevance and its momentum, we've seen this move towards more concrete commitments and deliverables. And we could see, if you look at the most recent meeting, the focus has been on maritime security, economic security, critical and emerging technologies, and humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. So you've seen some concrete initiatives emerge out of the most recent Quad foreign ministers meeting. Things like, for instance, the Quad critical minerals framework, or for instance, this establishment of an Indo-Pacific maritime surveillance cooperation initiative. So I think these initiatives are trying to put more meat on the bone of the Quad, move beyond some of the rhetoric to more substantive actions. And I think that would indicate the degree to which the Quad remains relevant. I think a key watch point will be to see if we see a Quad summit take place, a leader-level summit. It was supposed to happen last year, as I said, in India, but it didn't take place amid the downturn in India-U.S. relations. So I think that will be a key watch point. Maintaining engagement at a senior leadership level, I think, will also ensure the Quad's relevance. And also to see if it eventually, the Quad expands beyond its current 4 members to other countries and perhaps cooperation with other regional and global initiatives.
Let me come back to what you just said. Last year, the meeting was called off because of these tensions between the leaders of India and the United States. So where are we now? How central is India to the Quad's future?
I think India, in some ways, remains the elephant in the room. It is obviously the most populous country. It is on course to be the world's 3rd largest economy by the end of this decade. And it is the only country which doesn't have a formal alliance relationship with any of the other 3. So if the Quad is supposed to move towards more substance, I think it will need to make sure that India remains on board with it. And this, I think, speaks to this broader point of the state of the India-U.S. relationship. I think, frankly, that relationship has lost some of its shine over the last year. And I think part of that was driven by this idea of India being a seen sort of counterbalance to China. But that has frankly lost some of its appeal, particularly under the current administration in Washington, given that both New Delhi and Washington are independently trying to improve or reset their relationship with Beijing. This idea of India as some sort of counterbalance or bulwark against the rise of China has lost some of the appeal that it previously held under previous U.S. administrations.
You know, you mentioned that U.S. President Trump, he's not a big fan of these multilateral agreements, associations, or groups. There are, 2.5 years left of this Trump administration, and then President Trump will be history. With that in mind, what would success look like for the Quad, in your opinion, over the next 5 years?
Well, I think over the next 5 years, the near-term watch point will be to see if a Quad summit takes place. As I said, it didn't happen last year. If it happens this year, a leader-level summit, a focus more towards these more concrete deliverables, rather moving away from rhetoric, a potential expansion of the Quad beyond the four key member states, Australia, Japan, India, and the United States. You could see, for instance, South Korea as, again, another maritime democracy joining. Even some European countries with a Indo-Pacific presence. You could envision them potentially joining the Quad, like France or the United Kingdom, and then strengthening engagement with other like-minded groupings, things like Pax Silica, which is a grouping that was launched last year, focusing on AI, artificial intelligence, and supply chain security. There's an Australia, India, Indonesia trilateral framework. Could that potentially align itself closer to the Quad, or greater alignment with ASEAN, that's the Association of Southeast Asian Nations? So I think these would be some of the key indicators of the Quad strengthening its relevance in the Indo-Pacific.
Mr. Bajpaee, we've covered a lot of territory in these last 10 minutes or so. We appreciate your time and your valuable insights tonight. Thank you.